It has reached the point where the off-season no longer feels like a slow burn and instead feels like a fire alarm that will not stop ringing. Every hour brings a new rumor, every insider adds a new layer, and somehow the Toronto Blue Jays find themselves at the very center of the chaos. The pursuit of Kyle Tucker has spiraled into something bordering on absurd, not because the interest has cooled, but because it has intensified to such a degree that even the reporting can no longer keep up with itself. At the same time, an equally unsettling cloud is forming around Bo Bichette, and the combination of those two storylines has turned this winter into something genuinely out of hand. So stay right here with Blue Jays News, because this is one of those moments where the next few days could define the direction of the franchise for years to come. And before we dive into it all, if you are enjoying the Daily Jays content and want to stay locked in as the season creeps closer, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because this story is far from finished. There is no better place to start than with the most encouraging development we have heard in days, perhaps even weeks. Jared Carrabis, a voice deeply embedded in the Boston baseball ecosystem, and not someone known for hyping Toronto without reason, came out and said something that immediately set the internet buzzing. In his view, the market for Kyle Tucker feels like Toronto's market. Not that a deal is done, not that ink is dry, but that the gravitational pull of this entire free agency seems to be leaning north of the border. He even went as far as saying he is essentially waiting for the announcement of a 9-year deal for Tucker in Toronto. That kind of statement does not appear out of thin air, especially from someone whose Red Sox loyalties would normally push him in the opposite direction. Carrabis was careful to clarify that he was not breaking news, but his belief alone speaks volumes. It reflects a wider sentiment that has quietly taken hold among people around the league. If Kyle Tucker is going long-term, if security and commitment are his priorities, the Blue Jays appear to be the team most willing and most prepared to offer that kind of future. That idea has been echoed elsewhere as well, including by Mets insider Pat Ragazzo, who has openly said that Toronto makes the most sense for Tucker when you look at fit, roster construction, and competitive window. These are not casual fans talking. These are people with access, perspective, and context. And yet, just as quickly as optimism builds, it gets tested. Because for every report suggesting the Jays are favorites, another one appears questioning whether Tucker even wants to go long-term at all. His injury history, the argument goes, could push him towards a shorter deal with opt-outs, something more flexible, something that keeps future earning power intact. In that scenario, the Mets or the Dodgers suddenly loom larger. And this is where the entire situation tips from exciting into borderline ridiculous. Reports are no longer just conflicting. They are actively contradicting one another, sometimes from the same voices. Nothing illustrates this better than the whiplash surrounding Ken Rosenthal. Less than a week ago, Rosenthal was openly positioning the Blue Jays as favorites to land Kyle Tucker. He spoke about their aggressiveness, their financial capacity, and their need. Fast forward a few days, and suddenly he is saying that after landing Kazuma Okamoto, he does not view Toronto as being as needy as other teams still searching for a bat. For fans, it felt like someone had pulled the rug out from under them. How can the narrative swing so violently in such a short span of time? The answer, quite simply, is that we are approaching the endgame. This is what it looks like when leverage games are being played in public. Agents whisper one thing, executives leak another, and insiders piece together fragments that may already be outdated by the time they hit social media. It is chaotic, yes, but it is also a sign that a decision is drawing closer. The noise gets loudest just before the music stops. When you strip away the confusion, a clearer pattern begins to emerge. If Kyle Tucker wants a long-term deal, something in the region of 8 or 9 years, Toronto remains the strongest candidate. If he wants a shorter deal with flexibility built in, the Mets and Dodgers are far more appealing. That appears to be the real fork in the road, and everything else is smoke swirling around that central truth. The problem is that until Tucker chooses which path he prefers, every report will continue to pull fans in opposite directions. This is why I want to pause here and ask you directly. Would you sign Kyle Tucker to a 9-year deal if you were running the Blue Jays? Drop a yes or a no in the comments, because this is the exact question that Ross Atkins and the front office are wrestling with right now. And if you are enjoying this discussion, make sure you subscribe to Blue Jays News, because we will be talking through every twist of this saga together. As if the Tucker situation were not intense enough, the Bo Bichette storyline has taken a turn that feels genuinely unsettling. Ken Rosenthal reported that Bichette met with the Philadelphia Phillies over Zoom, and more importantly, he suggested that Philadelphia may now be the favorites to land him. That word again, favorite. It keeps coming back, haunting this offseason like a refrain. And this time it carries real weight. This is not just idle chatter. Jack Curry, one of the most reliable voices around the Yankees and the league at large, echoed the same sentiment. According to Curry, the Phillies are indeed viewed as the frontrunners for Bichette. When multiple credible insiders align like that, it stops being speculation and starts feeling like momentum. And momentum, once it builds, is very difficult to slow down. From Toronto's perspective, the silence has been deafening. The smoke that once surrounded a potential return for Bichette has completely dissipated. There are no counterleaks, no reassurances, no quiet optimism being floated. Instead, everything seems to be drifting away from the Blue Jays and towards Philadelphia. That does not happen by accident. It suggests that Bichette's camp and the Jays may have reached an understanding, even if unofficial, that the numbers are not going to align. If that is the case, it would also explain why Toronto moved decisively on Kazuma Okamoto. Perhaps they knew. Perhaps they were preparing for a future without Bichette and decided to reallocate resources early. It would make sense. It would be logical. But logic does not always soften the emotional blow, especially when you consider what comes next. There are scenarios in this offseason that feel manageable, and there are scenarios that feel catastrophic. The worst possible outcome remains Bo Bichette staying in the American League East, particularly with a direct rival. That nightmare still lingers, even if Philadelphia currently leads the race. A far more palatable outcome is Bichette heading to the National League while Toronto lands Kyle Tucker. That would feel like balance, like loss met with renewal. And then there is the middle ground, the uneasy compromise where Bichette leaves for the National League and Tucker goes elsewhere. Not ideal, but survivable. What makes this so tense is that we may already be drifting towards one of those middle outcomes. If Tucker ends up with the Mets and Bichette with the Phillies, Toronto will still be a very good team, but it will feel like something slipped through their fingers. And that feeling is being amplified by the way national voices have begun to downplay the Jays' urgency, almost as if to suggest they should be satisfied with what they have already done. And yet, perspective matters. One tweet that caught my eye put it perfectly. The fact that we are even debating whether the Blue Jays will sign the number one player on the free agent market while already sitting above the competitive balance tax threshold is remarkable. For years ago, this conversation would have felt like science fiction. The organization has changed. The ambition has changed. The expectations have changed. Look at the potential lineup if Kyle Tucker does arrive. It is borderline obscene. Springer setting the tone, Tucker adding a left-handed thunderclap, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. anchoring the middle, Santander, Kirk, Varsho, Okamoto, Jimenez. It reads like a fantasy draft rather than a real roster. On paper, it rivals anyone in baseball, including the Dodgers. That is not hyperbole. That is a genuine reflection of depth and balance. Even without Tucker or Bichette, this is still a formidable team. Projections suggest strength across nearly every position group. The rotation looks elite. The defense has been transformed. The offense, while perhaps lacking one superstar name, is deep and adaptable. The bullpen remains an area to upgrade, but that is a solvable problem. This has already been a very strong offseason, even if it feels incomplete. The danger now is not complacency, but paralysis. Waiting too long, hesitating at the final moment, could leave the Blue Jays watching the last major dominoes fall elsewhere. At the same time, overreacting could lead to contracts that haunt the payroll for years. This is the tightrope that championship-caliber teams must walk. Meanwhile, across the division, the Yankees appear to be stumbling through their own confusion. Reports suggest they are on the periphery of the Kyle Tucker talks, watching rather than leading. Their negotiations with other players have turned messy. It is a reminder that chaos is not unique to Toronto. The entire league is wrestling with the same uncertainty. And so we arrive at this strange, electric moment. Everything is in motion. Everything feels possible. Everything feels fragile. The Blue Jays are not on the outside looking in. They are in the room, at the table, part of every serious conversation. Whether that results in Kyle Tucker, or marks the end of the Bo Bichette era, or somehow delivers both clarity and closure, we are about to find out.